Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare.
First grader threatened to cut my head off with a pair of scissors because I told her she couldn't put a mutilated dead body on her banner. Hey everybody, welcome to AskReddit. People ask Reddit. Teachers of Reddit, what are your stories of, oh God, this child is a sociopath?
Number 1.
I have seen students display all sorts of extreme behavior over the past 20 years, teaching teenagers in challenging schools. The one kid that I was convinced was a psychopath, just quietly refused to do anything he didn't want to do. I never saw him angry, and yet I did see him hit people and say awful things to them. He was always eerily calm. He was tiny and very cute, but he used to manipulate people and watch chaos unfold with these huge unblinking puppy dog eyes. It was like he was carrying out an experiment. Anyway, that was when he was about 14. He's 19 now and serving a life sentence for a horrific gang murder.
Number 2.
I was often substituting a special needs class, 6 to 7 boys about 8 to 10 years old. The days were normally lively, but I always had everything under control, and the boys had learned to trust me and at least tried to do what I told them to. Never had any real problems, just normal stuff. Then one time there was a new boy in the class. Their teacher had written me a note that said to keep a close eye on him at all times. He had the telltale features of a Foz child and small, black eyes like a shark. He never showed any emotion whatsoever, excluding immense excitement if someone else got hurt in any way. Few days passed without any incidents, and then, out of the blue, he stands up in the middle of class, yanks the much smaller guy sitting in front of him down with his chair from behind and starts to pummel him in the face with his fists. I ran to intervene and grabbed him off and set him in a corner, ordering one of the trustworthy boys to run and get the principal here now. The attacker stood in the corner, emotionless as ever and completely calm. I turned to check out the crying kid on the floor, and miraculously he seemed unharmed but was just shaken up by the surprise attack. I sat down on the floor to calm him down and to help him up. Next thing I know is the shark-eye kid standing beside me and stabbing me on the leg with my teacher's scissors, the only pointy ones in the classroom. It was then when I realized why the attacked kid wasn't badly hurt. Shark-eye was big for his age, but he had no physical strength at all. I didn't even get a bruise from his stab. My trusty Lee's jeans stopped the blade, which I instantly took from him. I threw the scissors on top of a high shelf and ordered everyone else out of the classroom to wait for the principal's arrival while I watched over Shark-eye. Boys ran out. Shark-eye looked at me curiously for a few seconds and sat down at his desk and continued his math assignments like nothing had happened. I asked him quite sternly what had made him attack a fellow student. Shark-eye lifted his empty gaze and said, I heard him laughing at the school cafeteria. I thought he could have been laughing at me. Larindel, can we play football today in P class? The boy had no empathy or remorse. The episode meant absolutely nothing to him. When the principal arrived, we went through the situation and the class affirmed my description or events as they had happened. Shark-eye's mom picked him up early and he stayed at home for a few days. The principal told me that this was not the first such incident and that the boy was in line for a hospital school class. The principal commended me for my actions. I was very young at the time, and was surprised that I had been able to keep my cool even after getting stabbed, even if the attempt had been pitiful. Turns out that's my teacher's superpower. I never lose it. Even when I've been spit at, got chairs thrown at me, someone trying to gouge my eyes out while holding them more than once, etc. Luckily, the years in the same school have accumulated my reputation, and nowadays it's very rare that someone even dares to try to mess with me. This incident was nearly 20 years ago, but I'll never forget it.
Number 3.
I worked with a student who would fit this description. The stories of the things he did are extensive. One example is that he got up from his seat to throw something away. On his way back, he walked up behind a student who was distracted working on his assignment. Out of the blue, he pushed the working student's head forward and into the desk. He gave him a bloody nose. There had been no previous altercation or source of friction between the two. His parents were divorced and his mother was too afraid of him to have him during the days she had custody. His father would move him frequently from school to school once his behavior got so bad that the school started the process to get him into psychiatric care.
Number 4.
The first grader threatened to cut my head off with a pair of scissors because I told her she couldn't put a mutilated dead body on her banner. Edit, for the people saying in the comments that that kind of talk is normal for a first grader, by threatening to cut my head off with a pair of scissors I mean she came at me with a pair of scissors while saying in a completely serious voice that she was going to cut my head off with the pair of scissors she was brandishing. Edit, this was over a decade before God came out.
Number 5.
I have a million stories of students who say borderline sociopathic stuff, but the worst thing I've ever heard to date was, "I can't be trusted with knives. My mommy hides all knives in the house from me because I've tried to stab everything and everyone. I know if I stab an animal or a person too much they might die. This would mean I'd go to jail and I don't think I could make it in jail. So I want to find a dead body and stab it over and over again. This way I know I won't get in too much trouble cause the person was already dead."
Number 6.
I had a student while I was doing my student teaching, 8th grade. He was constantly in trouble, but during the times he was in class, he just stared off with the most vacant look in his eyes. It truly scared me. It was downright creepy. One day he was up at the whiteboard writing some stuff, I think it was correcting sentences, with a bunch of other kids who were doing the same thing. I wasn't watching the kids at the board, and all of a sudden I heard this blood-curdling scream and looked over. He had brought a hypodermic needle and had stabbed the girl next to him in the leg. He had been holding it in his hand the entire time, just waiting for the opportunity to stick someone. It was, of course, terrible, but the girl turned out okay. The worst part, besides that, was how he laughed when security came to get him. Ugh, I'm shuddering now just thinking about it.
Number 7.
Had a high school freshman who was a very boisterous kid, and youthful for his age. One day he was being disruptive and acting up, so I asked him to step out of the room with me while my co-teacher continued the lesson. I calmly explained to him why I had taken him out, why his behavior was disruptive, and I asked him to be more mindful in the future. He seemed attentive to me, and to understand where I was coming from. Then, just as I was about to go back in with him, he says to me, "Okay, I'm gonna start crying so everyone thinks you yelled at me." I immediately put the brakes on. I asked him why he wanted to do that, why he felt it was okay to lie like that, and why he wanted to make me seem like a bad person when I had been very polite and thought we had had a good interaction. He didn't have any good answers with me, but we had already spent enough time out of class. I got him to agree to go in quietly and we went on with the lesson. Needless to say, it was a sign of things to come. He turned out to be a gossiping, backstabbing little social monster. The more mature kids learned to keep their distance from him, and he cultivated friendships with other kids who enjoyed his acting out and emulated it. We finished out the year on reasonable terms, but as he went on to other teachers with different classroom styles, his behavior worsened and derailed many classes.
Number 8.
Had a 6-year-old the size of a 9-year-old pin a 4-year-old to a wall, and at least looked like he was trying to feel her up. I walked up behind him and shouted, "What the hell do you think you are doing?" And he immediately backed off and started stuttering trying to explain himself. He would say some F-up shit, too. One time, he walked up to me, a 6-foot-tall, bearded man, and said, basically, "Hey mama, let me suck on their titties." Hated that kid. If you told him to do anything, he would intentionally do something to go against what he was told. His parents spoiled him rotten, and let him do whatever he wanted. He got away with anything, because a former teacher had inadvertently injured him, and his family, who are filthy rich, threatened to sue the dogshit out of the school. He basically had immunity from discipline at school, and parents that let him do whatever he wanted. He hated me, because I wouldn't put up with his shit. I never hurt him, but I would put him in a hold so that he couldn't move fairly often, because he would constantly sucker punch other, smaller kids, for just about any reason at all. Even if he just wanted the toy they were holding. Kid was a little sociopath, with parents that were rich enough that they enabled the behavior.
Number 9.
This one happened just the other day and, obviously, I'm going to be anonymous about it to protect the child's identity. Let's call her Abby. So, I'm driving a minibus of students home from a basketball practice when suddenly Abby starts screaming, "Did that have peanuts in it? I'm allergic to peanuts." She begins hyperventilating and crying and actually makes me pull over so she can get off the bus and throw up. We're about 15 minutes from the school and I'm literally having a panic attack. So, I call the principal and ask what I should do. Do we have an EpiPen on hand at the school? She seems confused and puts Abby's grandmother on, who tells me she wasn't aware of her granddaughter, who is claiming she can barely breathe, had any allergies. When we got back to the school I was about ready to faint, and the principal brought out her registration paperwork to show me, no listed allergies. She isn't allergic to anything, it was all an act. The hyperventilating, the crying, even the throwing up, was all for attention.
Number 10.
I taught a 15-year-old boy who was really creepy. He submitted a creative writing story that was rape fiction in which he graphically described how a white, blonde woman was being raped to corrupt the purity she feigns, which was quite scary as a white, blonde woman to read. When confronted by a vice principal, He started ranting about how he hated all the girls in the class because they were all bitches, even though none listed had ever had an interaction with him, positive or negative. He then wrote me an apology letter where heaps of the lines were aggressively crossed out with smile drawn next to them. At the last confrontation by a vice principal, he got really aggressive, walked out and punched the school fence several times. Unfortunately, he wasn't expelled.
Number 11.
I'm a gymnastics coach. This was several years ago, but we were running summer camps that were open to the public. One week I had a 6-year-old boy who threatened to slit my throat because I asked him to wait his turn to do some skill.
Number 12.
Had a kid that is basically Charles Manson. Has been aggressive before. Stabbing kindergarteners with scissors, hitting, biting, scratching. First grade began new behaviors. He would convince other kids to eat crayons, or to go tell other kids to say hurtful things to others. This was also the year he became more controlling over girls. He would invite them to play, then if they didn't do what he said, he would get the group to push the girl out. The result was the girls really wanted his attention. When the girls realized it wasn't worth it and began abandoning him, he became aggressive again. This year, 2nd grade, he has begun trying to find like-minded kids and create a gang of bullies. Of course, the staff are trying our best to curtail the behaviors, but the parents are very litigious. Multiple school psychologists and social workers have recommended individual therapy and social minutes, but the parents insisted it wasn't needed. They said that we were lying about the behaviors and wanted their own social services person to come in for observation. So obviously the student was on his best behavior. He is not stupid by any means. He knew what was up. The parents then used those findings to stonewall us for 6 more months. I do not believe any child beyond saving. But there are kids that really cannot be saved by public schools. This kid needs more social psych minutes, smaller classes, and more adult attention. We just don't have the money to provide that, especially when parents want to fight us every step tooth and nail. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.